Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is an American half-hour children's television series that was created and hosted by namesake Fred Rogers. The series originated in 1963 as Mr. Rogers on CBC Television, and was later debuted in 1966 as Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on the regional Eastern Educational Network, followed by its U.S. network debut on February 19, 1968, and it aired on NET and its successor, PBS, until August 31, 2001. The series is aimed primarily at preschool ages 2 to 5, but has been stated by PBS as appropriate for all ages. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was produced by Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, public broadcaster WQED and Rogers non-profit production company Family Communications, Incorporated. Previously known as Small World Enterprises prior to 1971, the company was renamed the Frederick Rogers Company after Rogers' death. The series could be seen in reruns on most PBS stations until August 31, 2007, when it began to be removed by various PBS stations, and then permanently removed by PBS after August 29, 2008 from their daily syndicated schedule. Despite this, a number of stations have chosen to continue airing the reruns independently of the PBS feed. Years after Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood went off the air, PBS created an animated spin-off called Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. History: the series had its genesis in 1953, when public television station WQED debuted The Children's Corner, a program featuring Rogers as puppeteer and Josie Carey as host, in an unscripted live television program. It was this program where many of the puppets, characters and music used in the later series were developed, such as King Friday 13, and Curious X the Owl. It was also the time when Rogers began wearing his famous sneakers, as he found them to be quieter than his work shoes while he was moving about behind the set. The show won a Sylvania Award for Best Children's Show, and was briefly broadcast nationally on the NBC television network. Rogers moved to Toronto, Ontario in 1963 to work on a new series based on The Children's Corner which was called Mr. Rogers, a 15-minute program on CBC Television. Mr. Rogers aired on CBC for 3 years and a number of the set pieces that he would take with him back to the U.S., such as the trolley and castle, were created for the Canadian program by CBC designers. Most importantly, Rogers appeared on camera in the new show rather than only appearing through puppets or characters. Fred Rainsbury, head of children's programming at CBC, persuaded Rogers to appear on camera in the new show after seeing him interact with children. Ernie Coombs, one of the Americans whom Rogers brought with him to help develop the CBC show, would remain with CBC, after Rogers returned to the U.S., and develop what became Mr. Dressup which continued for several decades. In 1966, Rogers acquired the rights to his program from the CBC and moved the show to WQED in Pittsburgh, where he had worked on The Children's Corner. He renamed the show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which initially aired regionally in the northeastern U.S. through WQED, including educational stations in Boston, Washington, D.C., and New York City. The 100 episodes of the half-hour show incorporated the neighborhood of make-believe segments from the CBC episodes with additional reality-based opening and closing material produced in Pittsburgh. The series was cancelled in 1967 due to lack of funding, but an outpouring of public response prompted a search for new funding. In 1967, the Sears Roebuck Foundation provided funding for the program, which enabled them to be seen nationwide on national educational television. Taping began in October 1967 for the first national season. The first national broadcast of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood appeared on most NET stations on February 19, 1968. In 1970, when PBS replaced NET, it also inherited this program. Around the same time the show had a slight title change, to the more familiar Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. The show was in production from February 19, 1968 to February 20, 1976, and again from August 27, 1979 to August 31, 2001. The studio in Pittsburgh where the series was taped was later renamed the Frederick Rogers Studio, in honor of Rogers himself. Premise: Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood consisted of Rogers speaking directly to the viewer about various issues, taking the viewer on tours of factories, demonstrating experiments, crafts, and music, and interacting with his friends. Rogers also made a point to simply behave naturally on camera rather than acting out a character, stating that one of the greatest gifts you can give anybody is the gift of your honest self. I also believe that kids can spot a phony a mile away. The half-hour episodes were punctuated by a puppet segment chronicling occurrences in the neighborhood of make-believe. During the opening sequence of each episode, the camera pans slowly over a model of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, while the neighborhood trolley crosses a couple of streets from left to right. This is the same model electric trolley that later in the program will transport viewers into the neighborhood of make-believe. Following that, Fred Rogers enters his television studio house, singing "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" He hangs his coat in a closet, puts on a cardigan zipper sweater, and removes his dress shoes to put on a pair of blue sneakers. One of Rogers' sweaters now hangs in the Smithsonian Institution, a testament to the cultural influence of his simple daily ritual. In the closing of each episode, Fred sings "It's Such a Good Feeling" as he removes his sneakers and puts his shoes back on, and then switches out of his sweater and back to his coat. At the end of the song, he reminds the viewers that you always make each day a special day. You know how, by just your being you yourself. There's only one person in the world that's like you, and that's you. And people can like you just exactly the way you are. He then signs off as he walks out the door, usually by saying, "I'll be back next time. Bye-bye." As the end credits roll complete with title and episode number, the camera does a reverse pan of his model neighborhood, with the neighborhood trolley crossing from right to left. Starting in 1979, episodes were grouped into week-long series, with each series focused on a particular topic. Rogers' monologues throughout the week explore various facets of the topic, and the ongoing story from the neighborhood of make-believe serves as illustration. Rogers covered a broad range of topics over the years, and the series did not shy away from issues that other children's programming avoided. In fact, Rogers endeared himself to many when, on March 23, 1970, he dealt with the death of one of his pet goldfish. The series also dealt with competition, divorce, and war. Rogers returned to the topic of anger regularly and focused on peaceful ways of dealing with angry feelings. Mr. Rogers always made a clear distinction between the realistic world of his television neighborhood and the fantasy world of make-believe. He often discussed what was going to happen in make-believe before the next fantasy segment was shown, and sometimes acted out bits of make-believe with models on a table before the camera transitioned to the live-action puppet rendition. The miniature motorized trolley, with its accompanying fast-paced piano theme music, was the only element that appeared regularly in both the realistic world and make-believe. It was used to transport viewers from one realm to the other. Rogers, however, was mentioned from time to time in make-believe, particularly by Mr. McFeely, who appeared occasionally in the make-believe segments and seemed to form a link between the two worlds. The idea of the trolley came from Rogers. When he was young, there had been lots of trolleys operating in Pittsburgh and he liked riding on them. This reality-fantasy distinction put Rogers' series in sharp contrast with other children's series, such as fellow PBS program Sesame Street, which freely mixed realistic and fantastic elements. The series featured Picture-Picture, a rear projection motion picture and slide projector, whose screen is encased with a picture frame. In early episodes, Picture-Picture would show various films or slides at Mr. Rogers' command. After the material was presented, Mr. Rogers would thank Picture-Picture, in which it will return a "You're welcome" on its screen. After 1970, Picture-Picture no longer operated magically, becoming merely a projector. Mr. Rogers would insert a film, slides or videotape through a slot on the side, then show the material using a wired remote control. When Picture-Picture was not used, a different painting would be displayed on its screen. Often it would display the words "Hello" or "Hi" at the opening. The series was also notable for its use of jazz-inspired music, mostly arranged and performed by Johnny Coster, until Coster's death in 1996, when he was succeeded by Michael Morage for the remainder of the series. The music was unique in its simplicity and flow that blended with the series' sketches and features. The music was usually played live during taping. Lyrics and melodies were written and sung by Rogers, who created more than 200 original songs. After the series, when Fred Rogers died in 2003, PBS's website provided suggestions to parents on how to respond to children who ask about Rogers' death. Beginning September 3, 2007, some PBS affiliates began replacing the show with new programs such as Super Y, Word Girl and Word World. In June 2008, PBS announced that, beginning in late 2008, it would stop broadcasting Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as part of its daily syndication lineup to member stations, instead airing the program only once a week over the weekend. Milwaukee Public Television, for example, still carries the show once a week, on Sunday, over its primary HDSD channel. Beginning on September 1, 2008, the Neighborhood program was replaced by new programming such as Martha Speaks, Sid the Science Kid, and an update of the Electric Company. However, individual member stations have the option of airing the Neighborhood independently of the PBS syndicated feed, with series home WQED in particular continuing to air the series daily until 2010. There was a campaign in 2008 and 2009 to urge PBS and all member stations to bring the show back 7 days a week. Animated spin-off. In July 2011, during the annual Television Critics Association Summer Press Tour, it was announced that a new animated spin-off series, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, was in production. The show debuted on most PBS stations on September 3, 2012. The series features Daniel Tiger as a host of the series, which also features characters of the neighborhood of make-believe all grown older, with the children now having families of their own. Regular songs. The song Won't You Be My Neighbor was written by Fred Rogers in 1967 and was used as the opening theme for each episode of the show. In the early years of the show, when new episodes were constantly being produced, each show ended with the song Tomorrow, which was written by Rogers' former colleague, Josie Carey. Starting in 1971, Tomorrow was used only on episodes which aired Monday through Thursday, and a new song, called the Weekend Song, was used on shows that aired on Friday. Eventually, the Tomorrow song was eliminated entirely due to copyright issues, and by 1973 Rogers sang It's Such a Good Feeling at the end of every show. Prior to 1973, the original version of Good Feeling was used as part of Mr. Rogers' general repertoire of songs. When Good Feeling became used as a closing theme, it was slightly rewritten, incorporating the first 4 lines of the Weekend Song at the end, though rendered during the week as, and I'll be back when the day is new, with day changed to week on Friday episodes. In 1991, the early episodes were removed from rotation, and so the Tomorrow song was no longer heard. Broadcast history. The first broadcast of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was on the National Educational Television Network on February 19, 1968. The color NET logo appeared on a model building at the beginning and end of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood from 1969 to 1970. When NET ceased broadcasting, the series moved to PBS, even though episodes as late as 1971 were still copyrighted by and produced for NET. The series' first season consisted of 130 episodes, produced in black and white. For seasons 2 to 8, the show produced 65 new color episodes each year. By the end of season 8, this meant there was a library of 455 color episodes which could be repeated indefinitely, and it was decided to wrap up production of the series. As a consequence, season 9 consisted of only 5 episodes. These 5 new episodes featured Mr. Rogers in his workshop, watching scenes of past episodes of his series, which he recorded on video cassettes and kept on the shelf in his workshop. On the Friday episode of that week, he reminded viewers that they, too, could watch many of those old episodes beginning the following week. 2 other episodes were produced and aired as specials, a Christmas show in December 1977 and a springtime show in the spring of 1978. In 1979, it was decided to resume production of the series, with an eye towards freshening up the show by producing 15 new episodes per year. These second series episodes would be mixed in with the already airing cycle of repeats from the so-called first series. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood produced approximately 15 new episodes a year between 1979 and 1993. As well, there were occasional Mr. Rogers Talks to Parents specials, which featured panelists discussing ways in which parents could talk to their children about the issues discussed on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. These specials were usually aired on weekends, just prior to the airing of a new batch of Monday to Friday episodes. Beginning in 1994, the production schedule was changed so that 10 new episodes a year were produced instead of 15. Shortly thereafter, as of August 11, 1995, the episodes from the first series were withdrawn from the repeat schedule, since there were over 200 second series episodes available for broadcast, and many of the first series episodes had become outdated. The show's final years varied the number of episodes produced per season. Season 26 consisted of 20 episodes, Season 27 produced 10 episodes, Seasons 28 and 29 both contain 15 episodes, and Season 30 reverted to 10 episodes. The final season, 2001 Season 31, which was taped the month before it was broadcast, consisted of 5 episodes only, centering around the theme Celebrate the Arts. A few episodes from the first series are available for viewing in the Museum of Television and Radio, including the first episode of the series and the first color episode. A complete collection of episodes, including more than 900 videotapes and scripts from the show along with other promotional materials produced by Rogers or his Family Communications Incorporated production company, exists in the University of Pittsburgh's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood Archives located in the Elizabeth Nesbit Room in the university's School of Information Sciences building. Reruns When PBS began re-airing the first 460 color episodes of the series in 1976, some of the earliest color episodes from 1969 and 1970 were re-edited with new voiceovers or footage. For example, in one 1970 episode where Mr. Rogers demonstrates the noise-proof ear protectors that airport workers use on the tarmac, the film footage used featured a worker directing a United Airlines jet with its stylized U logo Euro, which wasn't introduced until 1974. All of the episodes revised from the first series also included an extra segment following the closing credits, mentioning the episode number and additional companies that provided funding since these episodes originally aired, even though they had not provided funding at the time of original production. As of 2013, almost all of the 1979 2001 second series episodes are still in active rotation on a number of PBS stations. The only exception is the week-long Conflict series, first aired during the week of November 7, 11, 1983 to coincide with ABC's airing of the television film The Day After, and designed for children to cope with the after effects of that film. The series story arc covered the topics of war, bombs, and an arms race. The Conflict series was last aired on PBS during the week of April 1 to 5, 1996. Only a few episodes of the series have been released to DVD by Anchor Bay Entertainment, although some earlier compilation-based releases were issued on VHS by Playhouse Video during the mid-1980s. 100 episodes have subsequently been released as part of Amazon Video. Characters Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood Characters on the series include, Mr. McFeely the delivery man, named for Fred Rogers' maternal grandfather, Neighbor Burr, Lady Oberlin, Marilyn Barnett, Chef Brockett, Tony Kyroles, Jose Cisneros, Officer Clemens, Keith David, Emily the Poetry Lady, Pilot Ito Mrs. McFeely, Handyman Negri, Sergio Pinto, John Reardon, Miss Paulificate, Mayor Maggie, Bob Trow. Other regular puppeteers included, Michael Horton, Lenny Meledandri, Carol Switala. Music directors for the series, Johnny Costa, Michael Marich, who took over as music director after Costa's death and served until the end of the series in 2001, musicians who played the background music along with Johnny Costa for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood included, Joe Negri, guitar, Carl McVicar Jr., bass, Bobby Rawsthorne, drums and percussion, The human characters who appeared in the neighborhood of make-believe were mostly imaginary versions of people who lived in Mr. Rogers' real neighborhood. For example, Joe Handyman Negri is a jazz guitarist who has taught music at several Pittsburgh universities and who operates the musical instrument shop on Rogers Street. The non-make-believe version of Betty Oberlin was an actress. Audrey Rath operated a janitorial service in the real neighborhood, but was royal phone operator Miss Paula Ficate in make-believe. Only Mr. McFeely, Mrs. McFeely, and Chef Brockett appeared substantially the same way in both Mr. Rogers' neighborhood and the neighborhood of make-believe. Neighborhood of make-believe equals. The neighborhood of make-believe is the fictional kingdom visited by Mr. Rogers during the show. Characters in the neighborhood of make-believe were portrayed by both hand puppets and actors. Anna Platypus, Betty O'Connack Templeton Jones, Bob Dog, Colette, Cornflake S. Peshley, Cousin Mary Owl, Cousin Stephen Owl, Daniel Striped Tiger, Don Quixote Drive Duckbill Platypus, Edgar Cook, Elsie Jean Platypus, Grandpa, Harriet Elizabeth Cow, Henrietta Pussycat, H.J. Elephant 3, Hula Mouse, Eno A. Horse, James Michael Jones, King Friday 13, Lady Elaine Fairchild and Mrs. Frog, Prince Tuesday, Princess Margaret H. Lizard, Purple Panda, Queen Sarah Saturday, Robert Troll, Tadpole Frog, X the Owl. Michael Keaton made his first television role as a volunteer in 1975. He played an acrobat in a troupe called the Flying Zucchinis that performed for King Friday's birthday and was also in charge of running the trolley. Operas 13 in-series operas took place during the course of the series within the make-believe segments. Many of them feature American baritone John Reardon as a main character. The operas would encompass the entire episode, and would be seen after a brief introduction by Mr. Rogers. Babysitter Opera, Campsite Opera, Teddy Bear Whaling's Ship Opera, Pineapples and Tomatoes, Monkey's Uncle, Snow People and Warm Pussycat, Potato Bugs and Cows, All in the Laundry, Key to Otherland, Windstorm in Bubbleland, Spoon Mountain, A Grandad for Daniel, A Star for Kitty. Additionally, a play, Josephine the Short-Necked Giraffe, first aired in 1989 as a tribute to the late John Reardon. Guests on the series ranged from cellist Yo-Yo Ma to actor and bodybuilder Lou Ferrigno of TV's The Incredible Hulk. A 1968 visit by electronic music pioneer Bruce Hook resurfaced in the 2004 documentary Hulk, King of Techno. Guests on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood were often surprised to find that although Rogers was just as gentle and patient in life as on television, he was nevertheless a perfectionist who did not allow shoddy ad-libbing. He believed that children were thoughtful people who deserved programming as good as anything produced for adults on television. Rogers appeared as a guest on some other series. On the children's animated cartoon series Arthur, for example, Rogers plays himself as an aardvark like Arthur. Later on, Arthur appears as a guest in hand puppet form in a 1999 episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in the Neighborhood of Make-Believe. Bill Nye, host of a science-themed program, and Rogers also exchanged appearances on each other's series, as did Rogers and Captain Kangaroo. Rogers additionally appeared in an episode of Sesame Street, where he explains to Big Bird that even if one loses a running race such as the one Big Bird had run against his friend Snuffy, no hard feelings threatened to break the two of them apart. Big Bird himself also appeared in one episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in the Neighborhood of Make-Believe. Episodes: First Series, 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 times 7 times 8 times 9. Second Series, 10 times 11 times 12 times 13 times 14 times 15 times 16 times 17 times 18 times 19 times 20 times 21 times 22 times 23 times 24 times 25 times 26 times 27 times 28 times 29 times 30 times 31. Specials: a prime-time Christmas special, Christmas Time with Mr. Rogers, first aired in 1977. This special had Frenna Section Wa Clemens introducing a storyteller and flutist friend to Rogers. They filmed a couple of narrated segments of the stories Frenna Section Wa friend told. The special also had the Neighborhood of Make-Believe segment which shows how they celebrated Christmas. The trolley had a banner on the roof that said Merry Christmas on one side, and Happy Hanukkah on the other. This special was aired every Christmas season until 1982. This special's opening and close have Rogers walking through a real neighborhood while the titles roll rather than the model neighborhood used in the series. In 1994, Rogers created another one-time special for PBS called Fred Rogers Heroes, which consisted of documentary portraits of 4 real-life people whose work helped make their communities better. Rogers, uncharacteristically dressed in a suit and tie, hosted in wraparound segments which did not use the neighborhood set. For a time Rogers produced specials for the parents as a precursor to the Subject of the Week on the neighborhood called Mr. Rogers Talks to Parents About, topic. Rogers didn't host those specials, though. Other people like Joan London, who hosted the Conflict special, and other news announcers played MC duties in front of a gallery of parents while Rogers answered questions from them. These specials were made to prepare the parents for any questions the children might ask after watching the episodes on that topic of the week. Legacy, Idleworld and Soak Zone, an amusement park near Rogers' hometown of Latrobe, Pennsylvania has an attraction called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood of Make-Believe featuring a life-size trolley ride, designed by Rogers. This was shut down in 2014 to reopen as Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood in 2015. The Planetarium Show The Sky Above Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is a computer-animated adaptation of the television show for preschool-aged children. After 3 years as a traveling exhibit, the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh had Welcome to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood installed as a permanent exhibit in 2004. A kiosk containing artifacts used during the series is located on Concourse C of Pittsburgh International Airport, near the Children's Play Area. A children's play area at Monroeville Mall in the Pittsburgh suburb of Monroeville was named for the television show. The Mr. Rogers Neighborhood Archives at the University of Pittsburgh School of Information Sciences is an academic resource and collection that contains correspondence, scripts, props, puppets, fan mail, 911 videotapes, and scholarly articles that show the cultural impact of Fred Rogers' work. A statue of Fred Rogers exists on the north shore of the Allegheny River near Heinz Field at the surviving footing of the Manchester Bridge. The music of the show was interpreted by an eclectic mix of modern artists for the 2005 album Songs from the Neighborhood, the music of Mr. Rogers. The YouTube show Pittsburgh Dad uses a piano theme song inspired by the jazz music constantly heard on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. A famous skit from Saturday Night Live is titled Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, an obvious parody of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood set in a housing complex neighborhood and starring comedians Eddie Murphy and Gilbert Gottfried. The musical project Symphony of Science, in association with PBS Digital Studios, created a music video called Garden of Your Mind from clips of the show, using spoken words of Rogers' pitch-corrected spoken words to create a song. The 2012 series Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, produced by the Frederick Rogers Company, is based on characters from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and the Neighborhood of Make-Believe. The original trolley is held on display at the Canadian Broadcasting Centre in Toronto. References. External links: Frederick Rogers Company PBS Kids, official site, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood at the Internet Movie Database, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood at TV.com, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood Archives at the University of Pittsburgh, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood related interview videos at the Archive of American Television.